The sound of a fist slamming against the table echoed through the Tactical Operations Center like a gunshot. Commander Floyd Fletcher stood, his face flushed crimson, finger pointed directly at the tactical map spread across the briefing table. "You want me to stake 12 lives on this insane plan, Captain Marshall?" 40 pairs of eyes in the briefing room turned toward the small woman standing beside the tactical display. Captain Ivy Marshall, 29 years old, wearing the uniform of a logistics officer without a single combat ribbon, stood silent, gaze fixed on the map. A ripple of mocking laughter came from the back. Major Bradley Cassian exchanging a derisive glance with Lieutenant Connor Webb. "With all due respect, sir," Ivy's voice came low and steady, "this is the only way to extract them from that valley before enemy reinforcement arrives." "The only way?" Fletcher's voice dripped with contempt. "How long have you been a logistics officer? 2 years? Do you even know what that valley looks like? Have you ever held a weapon in combat?" Ivy didn't respond. She only stared at the map, her finger unconsciously tracing a path across the terrain. The movement too familiar, too precise. But no one noticed. They only saw a desk officer trying to convince them she knew better than trained combat commanders. They didn't know that 2 years ago, in that exact valley, Ivy had led a team through that precise terrain. They didn't know about the scars hidden beneath her uniform sleeves. And they certainly didn't know that in the next 20 minutes, everything they thought about this logistics officer would be shattered completely. The radio crackled to life. "Base, this is Viper 1, enemy moving into position. We got maybe 3 hours. Repeat, 3 hours max." The clock was counting down. Fletcher leaned back, arms crossed, studying Ivy with the expression of a professor examining a failing student. "Captain Marshall, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but tactical extraction isn't about moving boxes from point A to point B. It's about reading terrain you've never seen, anticipating enemy movements you've never faced, and making split-second decisions that could cost lives. Sir, I understand the—" "Do you?" Captain Bellatrix Reeves cut in smoothly, her voice honey-coated poison. She stood near the intelligence station, perfectly pressed uniform adorned with combat ribbons. "Because from where I'm standing, suggesting a logistics officer knows extraction protocol better than Major Cassian, who has 3 tours under his belt, seems—" She paused for effect. "Ambitious." The word hung in the air like an accusation. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Lieutenant Connor Webb leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smirk playing at his lips. "Maybe stick to requisition forms, Marshal," Bellatrix added, turning back to her terminal with dismissive finality. Fletcher nodded, decision made. "Major Cassian, you're running this operation. Direct assault approach with helicopter gunship support. Get our boys out of that valley." Bradley stepped forward, confidence radiating from every movement. "Yes, sir. We'll punch through their positions, establish a security corridor, and extract via bird. Simple, straightforward, effective." He glanced at Ivy. "No offense, Captain, but this is what combat arms officers train for. We appreciate your input, but leave the tactical work to those who understand it." Ivy's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she said nothing. She simply gathered her notes, turned, and walked toward the door. "Marshall," Fletcher called after her. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "You're good at logistics. Really good. Keep doing what you're trained for. Don't try to be something you're not." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than Fletcher's earlier outburst. Before we continue with what happens next in this intense military standoff, I need to ask you something important. If you're feeling that frustration right now, that burning sense of injustice watching someone capable being dismissed, then you're exactly where you need to be. This story is about to take you on a journey you won't forget. But here's the thing. YouTube's algorithm only shows this to more people if you engage right now. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's about to unfold. Now, back to the story. Ivy returned to her logistics office, a cramped space filled with supply manifests and inventory spreadsheets. She closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, then moved to her desk where a satellite image of the valley glowed on her terminal screen. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up topographic data, weather patterns, historical engagement reports. But it wasn't the data itself that mattered. It was the way she studied it. Her eyes didn't scan randomly. They followed specific paths, traced particular ridgelines, lingered on coordinates that had no special marking on any official map. She zoomed in on a section of the northern ridge, tilted her head slightly, and whispered a number. November 73428. Outside her office, the TOC buzzed with preparation for Bradley's operation. Staff Sergeant Dylan Barrett sat at the communications station, coordinating with forward assets. He was 26, a veteran of 2 Afghanistan deployments, and he had the particular awareness that came from surviving situations where inattention meant death. He watched Captain Marshall through the glass partition of her office, watched how she stood, not the relaxed posture of a desk officer, but something else. When combat chatter came through the radio speakers, her shoulders squared automatically, her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. It lasted only a second before she caught herself, but Dylan noticed. "You see that?" he muttered to himself. Lieutenant Willow Hayes, the base's senior drone pilot, glanced up from her station. "See what?" "Marshall, the way she just moved, that wasn't—" He trailed off, unable to articulate what felt wrong, or rather what felt too right for a logistics officer. Willow studied Ivy through the glass. "She's been here 3 months, keeps to herself mostly. Does her job, doesn't socialize much. Why?" "I don't know. Something about her doesn't add up." In the main briefing area, Bradley was outlining his assault plan to the assembled team leaders. "We go in with 2 Apache gunships providing cover fire, suppress enemy positions along the approach route, establish security at the extraction point, load the SEAL team, and extract. Mission duration, 45 minutes from first shot to wheels up." Lieutenant Connor Webb nodded approval. "Aggressive. I like it. Shock and awe." "Exactly." Bradley tapped the map. "We hit them hard, hit them fast. Don't give them time to reorganize." Colonel Claudette Marsh, the Pentagon liaison, entered the TOC with the bearing of someone accustomed to doors being opened for her. She was 48, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and radiating the particular authority that came from having generals on speed dial. "Commander Fletcher," she said crisply, "Pentagon is monitoring the situation closely. We cannot afford another Black Hawk Down scenario. What's the plan?" Fletcher quickly briefed her on Bradley's approach. She listened, nodded, then asked, "Who developed this strategy?" "Major Cassian, ma'am, one of our best tactical minds." "Good. And I heard there was some disagreement earlier? A junior officer suggesting an alternative?" Fletcher waved dismissively. "Captain Marshall from Logistics. Enthusiastic but inexperienced. We're proceeding with military judgment over theoretical suggestions." "Appropriate." Claudette glanced toward Ivy's office. Junior officers often lack the perspective that comes from actual combat leadership. Important to maintain proper command hierarchy. In her office, Ivy pulled up a file on her personal drive, not accessible through military networks, stored on an encrypted external drive she kept in her desk. The file contained a single photograph, 8 soldiers in full combat gear, arms around each other, genuine smiles despite the harsh landscape behind them. 7 men, 1 woman. The woman's face was younger, harder, but unmistakably Ivy. Beneath the photo, 7 names, all marked with the same date, August 12, 2011. She closed the file quickly when someone knocked on her door. Captain Jasper Mitchell, the intelligence analyst, stepped inside. He was 35, methodical, the kind of person who noticed details others missed. "Captain Marshall, I need to coordinate supply logistics for the extraction operation. Can you ensure we have medical supplies staged at—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at her forearm where her sleeve had ridden up slightly. Ivy followed his gaze, quickly pulled her sleeve down, but not before he glimpsed the edge of something, a scar pattern, raised and distinctive. "IED?" he asked quietly. "Old injury, nothing relevant." "Right." But his eyes said he didn't believe her. IED scars had a particular pattern, and those weren't from a vehicle accident or training mishap. They were from being in the kill radius when a device detonated. "I'll need those supplies at grid reference Delta 5 by 1800 hours. You'll have them." After he left, Ivy stood and moved to her small window overlooking the base motor pool. Her hands unconsciously formed a grip, fingers positioned exactly as they would around an M4 carbine, muscle memory so ingrained she didn't even realize she was doing it. In the TOC, Bradley's team was loading up. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Waters, the base executive officer, watched the preparations with the quiet competence of a 50-year-old officer who had seen enough operations to know when something felt off. "Bradley," he called, Walk me through the approach route one more time. Bradley pointed to the map. We come in from the southeast, following this ridgeline. It provides cover from enemy positions to the north, gives us clear sight lines for suppression fire, and puts us at the extraction point in under 20 minutes. Arthur studied the map, frowning. And if they have got spotters on this ridge here, he pointed to an elevation to the west. That's 3 kilometers out, outside effective range for anything but heavy weapons, which they might have. Sir, with respect, we've got Apache support. Anything heavy enough to threaten us from that distance will get eliminated before they get a shot off. Arthur wasn't convinced, but he nodded. Keep your head on a swivel out there. As Bradley's convoy rolled out of the base gates, Private Lily Rodriguez, a 22-year-old communications specialist, walked past Ivy's office carrying equipment. She paused when she saw Ivy standing at the window, watching the convoy depart. There was something in the captain's posture, a tension that seemed more than concern. It looked like knowledge, like certainty of what was about to happen. Lily continued to the armory to sign out radio equipment. Inside, she found Senior Airman Mason Brooks, Ivy's logistics clerk, checking weapon racks. He worked with the careful precision of someone maintaining equipment, but Ivy had just walked through 30 minutes earlier and adjusted several weapons positions without seeming to think about it, spacing them differently, angling them for faster draw. Modifications that made sense only to someone trained in rapid armory access under combat conditions. Did Captain Marshall come through here? Lily asked. Mason nodded. She does that sometimes, reorganizes things. I asked her once why, and she just said it's more efficient this way. He gestured at the racks. Funny thing is, she's right. We can pull weapons 20% faster now. I don't know how she knew that. The tactical display in the TOC showed Bradley's convoy as blue icons moving across the terrain map. Fletcher stood with arms crossed, watching their progress with the satisfaction of a commander whose plan was proceeding smoothly. Dylan's voice crackled over the radio. Viper 1, this is base. Enemy patrol activity increasing in sectors Charlie and Echo. Recommend heightened awareness. Copy that, base. That was Master Sergeant Ronan Henderson, call sign Ghost, leading the trapped SEAL team. His voice carried the particular calm of someone who had been in worse situations and survived. We're tracking 4 patrols within 2 kilometers, still holding position at extraction point Alpha. Roger, Ghost. Cavalry's on the way. 23 minutes later, everything went wrong. Contact! Contact! Bradley's voice exploded through the radio. The calm professionalism shattered. We're taking fire from the western ridge. Heavy machine gun positions, RPGs. They knew we were coming. The TOC erupted into controlled chaos. Fletcher leaned over the tactical display as red icons blossomed across the screen, enemy positions that hadn't been there minutes ago suddenly revealing themselves. How did they... Fletcher started. They were waiting for us, sir. Bradley's voice came through to bursts of static and distant gunfire. They let us get into the valley corridor and then opened up from 3 sides. It's a kill box. Arthur grabbed the radio. Bradley, what's your status? 2 vehicles disabled, 3 wounded, pinned down and taking sustained fire. Sir, we need to pull back. This approach is compromised. Fletcher's face went white. Execute emergency withdrawal. Get your people out of there. Copy. Breaking contact now. More gunfire, shouting, the distinctive roar of an Apache's chain gun. Then, base, be advised, our extraction route is now blocked. SEAL team is cut off. Repeat, Viper 1 is cut off with enemy reinforcements moving into position. The TOC fell silent except for the crackling radio. 40 people stood frozen, the reality sinking in. 12 Navy SEALs were now completely isolated in hostile territory, with a battalion-strength enemy force closing in, and the rescue attempt had just failed catastrophically. Fletcher stood rigid, mind racing through options that were all bad. Bellatrix was already pulling up alternative approach routes, but each one showed the same problem. Every conventional assault route was now blocked or compromised. Connor Webb swore under his breath. We should have seen this coming. They baited us. They knew our doctrine, Arthur said quietly. They knew we'd come in aggressive with air support. They planned for it. Who cares how they knew? Fletcher snapped. What matters is we have 12 men about to be overrun and no way to reach them. Options. I need options now. The door to Ivy's office opened. She walked into the TOC carrying a rolled map, her face composed but her eyes carrying something else. Not fear, not panic, but a certainty that made several people turn to look at her. Sir, she said quietly, I have an option. The tactical display Ivy was studying used advanced satellite imaging technology, similar to what's revolutionizing civilian emergency response systems today. Modern GPS tracking devices and real-time terrain mapping software have become essential tools not just for military operations, but for search and rescue teams, wilderness guides, and even everyday hikers. These sophisticated positioning systems combine satellite data with topographic mapping to provide accuracy within feet, helping prevent situations where people become lost or stranded in dangerous terrain. The same technology that guides precision military operations now helps families stay connected and safe during outdoor adventures. Fletcher turned slowly, his expression somewhere between disbelief and anger. Marshal, unless your option involves magically teleporting 12 SEALs out of a hot zone, I don't. They're using Taliban ambush formation Delta, Ivy interrupted, her voice cutting through the room with unexpected authority. Three-sided box with heavy weapons on the high ground, lighter infantry controlling the approaches, command element positioned to direct reinforcements into gaps. It's textbook for that terrain. The room went quiet. Bellatrix turned from her station, eyebrows raised. And you know this how? Taliban tactical formations are classified briefing material. Ivy ignored the question, moving to the main tactical display. Bradley came in from the southeast because it looked like the path of least resistance. That's exactly what they wanted. The real approach is here. She pointed to a narrow canyon system on the northern edge of the valley, through Echo Canyon. It doesn't show on current maps because it was buried in a rock slide in 2009, but erosion has reopened it. The canyon provides complete concealment from enemy positions, exits directly at the SEAL team's location, and gives us a covered withdrawal route. Fletcher stared at her. Echo Canyon isn't on any map. It's there. Grid coordinates November 73428. Jasper immediately pulled up satellite imagery, zooming to those exact coordinates. His eyes widened. Sir, there is a canyon system here. It matches her description exactly. How did you... That's not our concern right now, Arthur cut in, studying the imagery. Captain Marshall, explain the rest of your plan. Ivy expanded the tactical view. We can't use conventional assault. They're expecting that. But we can use precision drone strikes to eliminate their command structure and heavy weapons positions, create chaos in their formation, then insert a small extraction team through Echo Canyon while they're disorganized. The SEAL team fights their way to the canyon entrance, 200 meters from their current position, meets the extraction team, and withdraws through the canyon to a secondary extraction point here. She indicated a position 5 kilometers north. That requires drone operators with surgical precision, Willow said, leaning forward with interest, taking out specific targets in complex terrain without hitting our own people. Yes, Ivy agreed simply. Bradley's voice crackled through the radio, strained. Base, enemy reinforcements arriving. We've got approximately 2 hours before they mass enough force to overrun Viper 1's position. Whatever you're going to do, decide now. Fletcher looked at the map, at Bradley's proposed alternatives, at the clock counting down. Every instinct told him not to trust a logistics officer with no combat record. Every regulation said to follow established doctrine. But established doctrine had just failed catastrophically, and 12 men were about to die. Marshal, he said finally, if this goes wrong, it won't. The certainty in her voice was absolute. Connor Webb stepped forward. Sir, you can't seriously be considering letting a logistics officer run a tactical operation. She's never even been in combat. You don't know that, Dylan said quietly from his station. Everyone turned to look at him. You don't know what her record is. Maybe we should find out before we dismiss her. Her record is public information, Bellatrix said dismissively. 2 years logistics. Before that, she pulled up Ivy's file on her terminal, then stopped. Her face went strange. That's odd. What? Fletcher demanded. Her service record before logistics assignment is redacted, heavily. Classification level secret. I don't have clearance to access it. The room's energy shifted. Officers exchanged glances. Why would a logistics officer's previous assignment be classified? Marshal, Fletcher said slowly, what did you do before logistics? I managed supply chains. Her voice was flat, offering nothing. For what unit? I'm not at liberty to discuss that, sir. Captain, I'm ordering you... The radio erupted. Base, this is Viper 1. We are taking casualties. We need immediate support or we will be overrun. Request permission to execute, break, and scatter. Ghost's voice, always calm, always professional, now carried an edge of desperation that silenced every argument in the TOC. Fletcher's jaw worked. He looked at Ivy, at the map, at the clock. 12 leaves balanced against protocol, against common sense, against his own instincts about what a logistics officer should or shouldn't know. "We're using your plan," he said finally, "but I'm assigning Lieutenant Hayes as drone operator. Sir, with respect, I need to be on those controls." Ivy's voice was absolutely steady. "What we're about to do requires someone who knows that terrain intimately. Lieutenant Hayes is an excellent pilot, but she's never operated in this specific valley. I have." "You've never been deployed to Afghanistan," Bellatrix said, checking the file again. "My file says a lot of things that aren't complete." Ivy turned to Fletcher. "Sir, you can question my credentials after we bring those men home. Right now, every second we debate is a second closer to 12 funerals." The brutal honesty of it cut through every objection. Fletcher nodded slowly. "Hayes, get her on the drone controls. Mitchell, pull up real-time overhead imagery. Waters, coordinate with Bradley's team for secondary support. Webb, I want you running communications between all elements. Marshall," he turned to Ivy, "you're running tactical. But if you're wrong about this, if those men die because I trusted you, there won't be enough ranks between you and a court-martial to matter." "Understood, sir." Ivy moved to the drone control station with the confident stride of someone who'd been there 1,000 times before. Willow yielded the primary seat but remained close, watching carefully. The control interface glowed to life under Ivy's hands. Multiple camera feeds, targeting reticles, weapon system status, communication channels. Her fingers moved across the controls with unconscious precision, not hunting for buttons or checking labels. She knew exactly where everything was. Willow noticed. Dylan noticed. Jasper, standing behind them, analyzing tactical data, noticed and felt a chill run down his spine. "Base, this is Viper 1. Ghost's voice came through, tension barely controlled. "Enemy is massing for final assault. Whatever you're doing, do it fast." Ivy's voice came out different, not the quiet, deferential tone of the logistics officer they'd dismissed, but something harder, carrying command authority that made people unconsciously straighten. "Viper 1, this is base actual. I need you to trust me for the next 15 minutes. When I tell you to move, you move immediately to bearing 290, 200 meters to tree line. There's a canyon entrance. You won't see it until you're on top of it. That's your extraction route. Confirm you copy." Silence on the other end. Then, "Base, who is this? Someone who knows that valley better than the enemy does. Do you copy?" Another pause, then Ghost's voice came back with a different quality. "Roger, standing by for your signal." Ivy turned to Fletcher. "I need weapons authorization for 8 Hellfire missiles and unrestricted engagement authority within these coordinates." She highlighted a box on the tactical map encompassing the valley. 8 Hellfires? That's our entire available load. They won't have time to reload and rearm. 1 pass, 8 targets. Either we eliminate their command structure now, or those SEALs die. There's no middle option. The mathematics of it was brutal and undeniable. Fletcher nodded to the weapons officer. "Authorization granted. Captain Marshall has tactical control." Ivy studied the overhead imagery, reading the battlefield like a language only she understood. Her eyes tracked movement patterns, identified vehicle positions, analyzed terrain and line of sight with the rapid calculation of someone who'd done this before. "First target," she said quietly, marking a position on the screen. "Enemy command post, Northern Ridge, range, 3,200 meters." Willow checked the coordinates. "That's a cave entrance. How do you know it's their command post?" "Because that's where I'd put it." Ivy locked the targeting solution. "Overwatch position with clear sight lines, natural hard cover, 3 separate exit routes." She paused, then added with absolute certainty, "And there's a command antenna visible in the thermal imagery if you look at the right angle." Jasper zoomed the thermal feed, adjusted the angle. "She's right. There, that heat signature is definitely electronics, and that pattern is consistent with a field communications array." "Target locked," Ivy said. "Engaging." The Hellfire missile streaked across the valley in 3 seconds of fire trail, impacting the cave entrance with devastating precision. Secondary explosions bloomed, ammunition cooking off inside. "Target destroyed," Willow confirmed, unable to keep the admiration out of her voice. That was perfect targeting. Ivy was already marking target 2. Enemy heavy weapons position, Western Ridge. They're dug in behind that rock formation. Looks like natural cover, but it's actually stacked deliberately. There's a DSHK heavy machine gun in there. How can you possibly, Connor started, because I've walked that exact ridge line. The words came out before Ivy could stop them. She froze for half a second, the first crack in her careful composure, then continued. Target locked. Engaging. The second missile eliminated the heavy weapons position. Enemy radio chatter erupted across the monitoring channels. Confusion, panic, commands being shouted in Pashto. Jasper translated quietly. They're trying to figure out who's hitting them. They didn't expect precision strikes. They expected conventional assault, Ivy said, marking target 3. Infantry concentration, southern approach. They're staged there to cut off retreat routes. Elimination creates an opening for our extraction team. 3 down, target 4. Ammunition cache hidden in what looked like a shepherd's hut. Ivy identified it from the thermal signature of the building. Too much heat for an abandoned structure. Target 5. Secondary command element trying to coordinate the confused defenders. Target 6. Sniper nest on the eastern ridge that Ivy identified from a single pixel anomaly in the optical feed. A scope reflection that would have been invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. Each strike was surgical. Each target was priority correct. Each decision was made with confidence that came only from intimate knowledge. Bradley's voice came through. Base, enemy formation is collapsing. Whatever you're doing, it's working. They're falling back in disorder. Maintain position, Fletcher ordered. Let them scatter. Ivy marked target 7, but paused before engaging. Her hand hovered over the firing control, and for the first time, people saw something crack in her composure, a flash of memory, of pain. Marshall? Willow prompted gently. Target 7 is a rally point where they're trying to reorganize. Ivy's voice was quieter now. It's at grid November 73419. Arthur pulled up the coordinate. His face went strange. That's, Captain, that location is flagged in our historical database. Coalition forces took casualties there in 2011. Operation Red Wings 2. He looked at her. How do you know about that grid? Ivy didn't answer. She just pressed the firing button. The 7th Hellfire eliminated the rally point, scattering the remaining enemy fighters into complete disarray. Final target, Ivy said, her voice mechanical now, emotion locked away. Enemy observation post monitoring the canyon entrance. If we don't eliminate it, they'll see our extraction team and the whole operation fails. She marked a position that seemed random, empty terrain on the tactical display. I don't see anything there, Willow said, checking her feeds. They're under thermal camouflage netting. Look at the vegetation pattern. See how that section doesn't move with the wind? That's canvas, not plants. Jasper enhanced the image, adjusted filters. She's right. There's definitely a constructed position there. He turned to stare at Ivy. How did you see that? Experience. Ivy locked the final target. Engaging. The 8th Hellfire completed its work. The valley fell quiet, except for scattered radio chatter and the sound of enemy forces retreating in panic. Viper 1, Ivy said into the radio, execute extraction now. Move to bearing 290, 200 meters. Canyon entrance will be marked with infrared strobe. Go now. Moving! Ghost's voice came back, sharp and professional. Gunfire erupted as the SEAL team broke from their defensive position, laying down suppressing fire as they moved. Ivy switched camera feeds, tracking their progress. Extraction team, insert now through northern route. You have 11 minutes to reach the rendezvous point before enemy reinforcements arrive. The operation unfolded like clockwork, every element moving exactly as Ivy had predicted, every contingency she'd planned for proving necessary. The SEAL team reached the canyon entrance right as the extraction team arrived from the opposite side. All personnel at rendezvous, Ghost reported, breathing hard. 12 souls plus 6 extraction team, moving through canyon now. The TOC erupted in cheers. Officers congratulated each other, relief flooding through the room. Fletcher exhaled slowly, tension bleeding from his shoulders. But Ivy didn't celebrate. She sat motionless at the drone controls, staring at the tactical display showing the valley, now littered with destroyed enemy positions. And her hands were shaking. Dylan noticed first. Captain Marshall, are you... New contact, Jasper shouted, cutting him off. Enemy reinforcements arriving. Battalion strength, 200+ fighters, heavy weapons, moving into the valley from the northwest. They'll cut off the canyon exit route in approximately 8 minutes. The celebration died instantly. Fletcher leaned over the display. No, we can't lose them now. They knew, Ivy said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring at the new enemy positions, with an expression somewhere between fury and resignation. They knew we'd use that canyon. This was never about stopping the first extraction. It was about luring us into using the hidden route so they could close the trap. Then what do we do? Connor demanded. We're out of Hellfires. We've got 18 men in a canyon with a battalion closing in, and I need close air support, Ivy cut him off. Fast movers, strike fighters, everything you can get airborne in the next 5 minutes. The nearest available strike package is 12 minutes out, Arthur said, checking air assets. They won't make it in time. Ivy's jaw set. She pulled up tactical data, ran calculations at speed that seemed impossible, and when she looked up, there was something in her eyes that made hardened combat veterans take a step back. Not fear, but absolute certainty forged in fire. Then I need unconventional engagement authority, she said to Fletcher. And you need to trust that I know exactly what I'm doing in that valley, because I've been there before. Not virtually, not in briefings. Actually there. Marshall, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Ivy said quietly, that you stop asking questions about my service record and start listening to the only person in this room who knows how to bring those men home alive. The radio crackled. Base, this is Viper 1. We can hear vehicles ahead of us. They're blocking the canyon exit. We're trapped. Request immediate support. 18 men in a box canyon with 200 enemy fighters closing in from both sides. The clock showed 6 minutes until contact. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Those little details that don't add up? That's exactly what I want you to feel right now. That nagging curiosity. If you're hooked, show it by hitting the like button. It tells me you want more stories like this. And believe me, what's coming next will blow your mind. Let's continue. Fletcher made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. Marshall, you have unconventional engagement authority. Tell me what you need. Ivy stood, moved to the main tactical display, and her entire bearing changed. The quiet logistics officer disappeared, replaced by something else. Someone who'd commanded before, who'd made life and death decisions, who carried the weight of choices that still haunted her. We can't hit them with missiles. They're too close to our people and too dispersed. But we can use their own tactics against them. She highlighted several positions on the map. These ridges here and here overlook the canyon system. If we can get sniper teams in position, they can provide cover fire for the extraction team to break through the blocking force. We don't have time to insert sniper teams, Bradley said from his position in the field. By the time we get assets positioned, it'll be over. We don't need to insert them. Ivy zoomed the map, showing positions that weren't marked on any official overlay. There are already positions there. Coalition forces built fighting positions in those exact locations during Operation Red Wings 2. Rock sangars, hard cover, clear fields of fire. They were abandoned after the operation, but the structures are still there. I can guide sniper teams to them using terrain features that aren't on current maps. You can guide, Bellatrix started, then stopped. Captain Marshall, those positions from Red Wings 2 are classified. The operation was a black op. There's no public record of exact fortification locations. I know, Ivy said simply. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jasper pulled up his terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. I'm accessing historical operation files. Marshall, if what you're saying is true, if you can actually guide teams to those positions, then you would have had to be... He stopped, staring at his screen. His face went white. Sir, I think you need to see this. He turned his monitor so Fletcher could see. On the screen was a heavily redacted document, but enough text was visible to read. Operation Red Wings 2, classified. Ground Force Commander, Captain I. Marshall, Shadow 7 Unit, August 2011. Fletcher read it again, then turned slowly to stare at Ivy. Shadow 7, he said quietly. The unit that was declared KIA. The entire team. Not the entire team, Ivy said softly. One survived. The TOC went absolutely silent. Arthur was the first to move. He came to attention, rendering a full military salute, his voice carrying across the room. Commander Marshall, Shadow 7, we believed you died with your unit. The title hit everyone like a physical blow. Commander, not captain. Commander was a classified designation, used only for operators leading special mission units. Shadow 7 wasn't just any team. It was legend status, the kind of unit that got whispered about in intelligence briefings, that had no official existence but everyone in the community knew about. Ivy didn't return the salute. She kept her eyes on the tactical display. My rank is captain. I requested demotion after Red Wings 2. Now, can we please focus on the mission? But the revelation changed everything. Officers were pulling up files, cross-referencing data, and the picture emerging was stunning. Ivy Marshall hadn't just served in Afghanistan. She'd commanded one of the most classified special operations units in military history. She hadn't just visited that valley. She'd fought there, lost her entire team there, and apparently survived against odds that had gotten her unit declared KIA. Connor Webb approached slowly, face burning with shame. Ma'am, I had no idea. The things I said... Later, Ivy cut him off. Right now, we have 18 men about to die because they're trapped in a valley I know better than anyone alive. Are we going to use that knowledge or waste time on apologies? Fletcher snapped back to command mode. Marshall, tell us what you need. 2 sniper teams, best shooters we have. I'll guide them to the old coalition positions. They'll have clear shots at the enemy blocking force. Once they start engaging, the extraction team punches through with maximum aggression. No finesse, just pure violence of action. They break the enemy line before reinforcements arrive. The blocking force has over 50 fighters, Bradley pointed out. 2 sniper teams they don't need to kill 50 fighters. They need to kill the right 5. Ivy highlighted specific positions. Command element here, heavy weapons team here, vehicle crew here. Take them out and the rest will scatter. It's basic human psychology. Remove leadership and most fighters won't maintain position under fire. It was ruthlessly practical battlefield psychology, the kind of analysis that came only from having done it before. Do it, Fletcher ordered. Get me 2 sniper teams in the air now. The next 4 minutes were a masterclass in tactical coordination. Ivy guided the helicopter-inserted sniper teams to positions using terrain features that didn't exist on their maps. The boulder shaped like a fist, the dead tree with 3 branches, the rock face with the red streak, descriptions so specific they could only come from having been there personally. Both teams reported, in position, we have eyes on target. Viper 1, Ivy said into the radio, on my mark, you're going to assault straight through their blocking position. Don't try to flank, don't try to maneuver, just hit them head on with everything you have. Snipers will clear your path 3 seconds before you reach their line. Mark is in 30 seconds. Understood. Ghost's voice was tense but steady. Who is this? Who's running tactical? Ivy hesitated. Then, someone who owes your unit a debt. Stand by. She switched to the sniper frequency. Sniper 1, Sniper 2, targets marked on your HUD. Simultaneous engagement on my mark. You will have exactly 1 shot before they realize where you're shooting from. Make it count. Sniper 1 copies. Sniper 2 copies. Ivy watched the tactical display, the enemy positions, the extraction team preparing to move. She was calculating angles and timing that most commanders would need minutes to figure out, doing it all in seconds based on terrain knowledge that lived in her muscle memory. Mark, she said quietly. 2 shots, fired almost simultaneously. 2 kills. Enemy commanders who'd been coordinating the blocking force. Engage! Ivy shouted. The sniper teams opened up with practiced precision. 5 shots in 8 seconds, eliminating the 5 targets Ivy had identified as critical. The enemy blocking force, suddenly leaderless and under accurate fire from positions they couldn't locate, did exactly what Ivy had predicted. They scattered. Go! 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 Ghost's voice over radio as the extraction team charged. They hit the disrupted enemy line like a battering ram. 18 highly trained operators against a suddenly disorganized force. It lasted 40 seconds of intense fire, and then they were through, racing toward the extraction point. Viper 1 is clear. All personnel accounted for. Requesting extraction at secondary LZ. The TOC erupted. This time the celebration was genuine. Mission complete. 0 friendly casualties. Enemy force neutralized through surgical application of violence. Fletcher turned to Ivy, saluted properly. Commander Marshall, that was the most impressive tactical operation I've witnessed in 30 years of service. Ivy finally returned the salute, but her face showed no triumph. only exhaustion. "It's what I was trained for, sir." Bellatrix approached, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "Ma'am, I judged you based on your current position, not your capabilities. That was unprofessional, and I apologize." Bradley came next, standing at attention. "Commander, I was arrogant and dismissive. You saved my team and the SEAL team. I owe you my career and my life." One by one, the officers who'd dismissed her, mocked her, excluded her came forward. Some apologized, some just stood at attention and saluted. All of them recognized that they had almost caused a catastrophe because they couldn't see past a uniform designation to the person wearing it. Colonel Claudette Marsh was the last. She approached with the measured steps of someone who'd badly miscalculated. "Commander Marshall, I made assumptions based on your current role. In my experience with Pentagon leadership, we often talk about looking beyond surface appearances. Today you taught me I need to practice what I preach. I'll be recommending you for immediate transfer to Tactical Operations Command." "Thank you, ma'am, but I'll remain in logistics." The room went quiet again. "Ma'am," Fletcher said carefully, "you just executed one of the most successful tactical operations this base has ever seen. Why would you want to stay in logistics?" Ivy was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display still showing the valley where her team had died 3 years ago. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried to every corner of the room. "Because 7 good soldiers died in that valley on my orders, sir. Because I called in those strikes, made those decisions, and they followed me into an ambush I should have anticipated." She turned to face them, and for the first time they saw the weight she carried. "I transferred to logistics because I couldn't lead anyone into combat again. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Because I thought if I stopped being a combat commander, maybe I could stop feeling responsible for their deaths." The raw honesty of it struck them silent. "Today proved I was wrong," Ivy continued. "Running from my past didn't change what happened. It just meant I wasn't there when my experience could have prevented others from dying." She looked at Fletcher. "I'll accept transfer to Tactical Operations, sir. Not because I want to, because those 7 soldiers trained me to do this, and hiding from that responsibility dishonors their sacrifice." Military personnel face unique financial challenges that many civilians never consider. Deployments that interrupt careers, specialized insurance needs for high-risk occupations, and complex benefit structures that require expert navigation. Comprehensive financial planning services designed specifically for service members address these concerns through specialized insurance products covering combat-related disabilities, investment strategies that account for irregular income during deployments, and retirement planning that integrates military pensions with civilian savings. Understanding these financial tools can mean the difference between security and vulnerability for those who serve, providing peace of mind that families are protected regardless of what happens in the field. Okay, pause for just 5 seconds. You've come this far, and I promise you, the next part is where everything explodes. But I need you to do something. Share this video with one person who loves military stories. Just one. Because what's about to be revealed will be the most satisfying moment you'll see today. Ready? Here we go. News of what happened spread through FUB Sentinel like wildfire. By evening, every soldier on base knew the story. How the quiet logistics officer had turned out to be a legendary special operations commander. How she'd saved 12 SEALs using tactics and terrain knowledge that shouldn't have been possible. How she'd hidden her past to escape the weight of command. Dylan organized an informal gathering in the mess hall. When Ivy entered, still wearing her logistics uniform, 200 soldiers stood at attention. Not because regulations demanded it, but because they chose to honor someone who embodied everything they respected about military service. Private Lily Rodriguez approached, eyes bright. "Ma'am, you're the reason I joined. When they said women couldn't do combat leadership, you proved them wrong years ago. I just didn't know it was you." Ivy shifted uncomfortably. "There are hundreds of women doing this every day, Private. I'm not special." "With respect, ma'am," Lily said quietly, "you led Shadow 7 through the worst terrain in Afghanistan, saved an entire team from capture, and survived when your whole unit was killed. Then you spent 3 years in logistics because you cared more about your team's deaths than your own glory. That's exactly the kind of leader we need." Before Ivy could respond, Ronan Henderson entered the mess hall with his SEAL team, all 12 men who had been extracted from the valley. They'd cleaned up from the mission, but still carried the edge that came from surviving something that should have killed them. Ronan approached and saluted. "Ma'am, my team wanted to thank you in person. You gave us what your team didn't get, a way home." Ivy's composure cracked slightly. "Ghost, ma'am, I've been doing this for 23 years. I know tactics, I know terrain, I know combat. What you did today wasn't luck. It wasn't procedure. It was perfect battlefield execution by someone who knew that valley better than the enemy did." He paused. "I heard about Shadow 7, about Red Wings 2. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Her voice was barely audible. One of the younger SEALs stepped forward, a kid who couldn't be more than 25. "Ma'am, we heard the story, about how you lost your team in that valley, about how you walked us through the same terrain they died in. That took a different kind of courage than what we do. Thank you." Fletcher arrived with Arthur Waters and several other senior officers. He carried a small presentation case. "Commander Marshall, while your modesty is admirable, the United States military has protocols for recognizing exceptional service. For your actions today, tactical brilliance under pressure, 0 friendly casualties, complete mission success against overwhelming odds, I'm awarding you the Bronze Star with Valor device." He opened the case, revealing the medal. "This will be a formal ceremony tomorrow, but I wanted you to know tonight, what you did today will be taught in tactical operations courses. They're already calling it the Marshall Protocol." Ivy accepted the medal case but didn't open it. "Sir, my team from Shadow 7 deserves recognition. They trained me. Everything I did today I learned from them. Then we'll honor them too," Fletcher promised. "A memorial service, full military honors. Their sacrifice won't be forgotten." As the gathering dispersed, Ivy found herself alone with Willow Hayes. The drone pilot had been quiet all evening, watching Ivy with an analytical gaze. "You know," Willow said finally, "I've been flying drones for 6 years. I'm good at it, really good. But watching you on those controls today, that wasn't just skill, that was instinct, like the drone was part of your body." "I trained for a long time." "No," Willow shook her head. "That was muscle memory, the kind you get from doing something in combat repeatedly, when your life depends on it." She paused. "Shadow 7 wasn't just a ground unit, was it? You ran drone operations, too." Ivy met her eyes. "Shadow 7 was a hybrid unit. We did our own overwatch, our own precision strikes, our own extractions, full-spectrum operations with minimal support. It's why we were effective, and why we all died when the mission went wrong. There was no backup, no reinforcements. Just 7 soldiers who trusted me to bring them home. But you survived." "I survived because my team covered my withdrawal, because they died buying me time to escape. I was the commander. I should have been the last one out, not the only one out." The guilt in her voice was raw, unhealed even after 3 years. "Commander," Willow said gently, "I don't know what happened that day, but I know what I saw today. You used the knowledge they gave you to save 18 lives. Maybe that's how you honor them. Not by hiding from what you learned, but by using it to prevent other people from suffering what you suffered." Ivy was quiet for a long time. Then, "Maybe you're right." She walked out into the Afghan night, looking toward the mountains where her team had died. The memorial wall on base was nearby, and she found herself standing before it, running her fingers over 7 names carved into stone. CPL James Mitchell, SSG David Rodriguez, SOG Sarah Torres, CPL Michael Anderson, SPC Robert Henderson, PFC Elena Parker, SSG Christopher Allen. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I survived. And you didn't. I'm sorry I hid from what we built together. I'm sorry it took almost losing another team for me to remember why we did this." She touched each name. "But I'm going back. I'm going to lead again. And I'm going to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to anyone else." The wind carried her words away into the darkness, toward the valley where Shadow 7 had fallen, where 12 SEALs had almost joined them, where Ivy Marshall had finally stopped running from the person she'd been trained to be. Behind her, Fletcher watched from a distance. He'd come to find her, to discuss her transfer orders, but seeing her at the memorial wall stopped him. Some moments were too private for intrusion, even by commanding officers. Arthur joined him quietly. "The Pentagon is already calling. They want her for Advanced Tactical Training Command, teaching the next generation." "She'll refuse," Fletcher said. "She'll want to go back to field operations." "After 3 years away?" "She was never away. She just pretended to be. Fletcher turned to Arthur. Did you see the way she operated today? That wasn't someone dusting off old skills. That was someone who'd been maintaining them, studying them, keeping herself sharp, even while pretending she wanted nothing to do with combat. Why do that? Because warriors don't stop being warriors just because they take off the uniform. They just find other ways to stay ready. Fletcher watched Ivy standing before the memorial. She's been preparing for this moment since the day her team died, waiting for when she'd be needed again. Today proved she was right to wait. The chain of command and decision-making protocols in military operations reflect principles taught in advanced leadership and crisis management programs. Executive education courses now incorporate military decision-making frameworks, teaching corporate leaders how to make high-stakes choices under pressure, manage diverse teams in stressful environments, and maintain accountability when consequences are severe. These programs analyze real military scenarios to extract lessons applicable to business crises, using case studies of tactical decisions to develop skills in rapid assessment, resource allocation, and team coordination. Professional development in crisis leadership has become essential for executives facing increasingly complex business environments. If that gave you chills, wait until you see what I have coming next. I've got another story about a female Marine who walked into a military tribunal, and what she revealed made a 4-star general break protocol. It's live on my channel right now, but first, let's finish this one. You deserve to see how this ends. 3 weeks after the extraction operation, Ivy Marshall sat in her new office. Not logistics anymore, but tactical operations command. The space was larger, with screens showing real-time battlefield data, secure communications equipment, and maps covering 3 different operational theaters. She'd moved in yesterday but still felt like an imposter. Her uniform now carried the combat ribbons she'd earned but never displayed, including the Silver Star from Red Wings 2. Fletcher had insisted. You earned them. Wear them with pride. But pride wasn't what she felt. Mostly she felt like she was betraying her team by continuing without them. A knock on her door. Come in. Aiden Foster entered, now assigned to her command element. Ma'am, you wanted to see the training protocols for the new tactical operations course? Yes, thank you. She took the folder, but before Aiden could leave. Foster, can I ask you something? Of course, ma'am. You said you ran parallel operations to Shadow 7 back in 2011. Did you... She struggled with the words. Did you hear what happened? The real story, not the official report? Aiden was quiet for a moment, then closed the door and sat down. I heard rumors. That Shadow 7 was betrayed. Someone leaked your position to enemy forces. That you walked into an ambush that was planned specifically for your unit. That your team held off battalion strength forces for 6 hours while you called in danger-close airstrikes and tried to find an escape route. He met her eyes. I heard you were the only survivor because your team made a conscious decision to cover your withdrawal while they stayed behind. Because you were the commander, and commanders carry the knowledge that can't be lost. Ivy's throat was tight. They died for me. They died doing their job, ma'am. Which was protecting their commander so the unit's experience could be passed on. Aiden leaned forward. Commander, I've studied Shadow 7's tactics since that day. Your unit pioneered techniques that are now standard doctrine in special operations. If you hadn't survived, all that knowledge would have died. Your team knew that. They made sure you lived because what you learned together was too valuable to lose. It doesn't feel valuable. It feels like a burden. The best lessons always do. Aiden stood. Ma'am, you saved 18 lives 3 weeks ago using skills Shadow 7 taught you. How many more lives will you save by teaching others what your team learned? That's not a burden. That's a legacy. After he left, Ivy sat alone with her thoughts. Maybe he was right. Maybe the way to honor her team wasn't to hide from what they'd taught her, but to make sure their knowledge lived on. Her secure phone rang. The display showed classified. JSOC. She answered, Captain Marshall. Commander Marshall, the voice corrected firmly. This is General Raymond Foster, Joint Special Operations Command. We need to discuss your future. Sir, I've accepted assignment to Tactical Operations Command here at FOB Sentinel. That's a waste of your capabilities, Commander. We're standing up Shadow 9. 8 operators, deep cover, high-value target prosecution. We need a ground force commander who's been where they're going. He paused. We need someone who understands the terrain in eastern Afghanistan. Ivy felt her heart rate increase. Sir, Shadow 7 operated in that region. I'm not... which is exactly why we need you. Commander, are you aware that the individual who ordered the ambush on Shadow 7, the one who betrayed your position to enemy forces, is still operating in that region? The room seemed to tilt. What? His name is Khalid Rahman, former Taliban commander, now running a transnational terrorist network. He's evaded capture for 3 years by hiding in the same valley system where Shadow 7 fell. He thinks he's safe. He thinks the only people who knew that terrain well enough to threaten him died with your unit. Ivy's hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. General, what exactly are you asking? I'm asking if you want the opportunity to finish what Shadow 7 started. To go back to that valley, to bring your ghosts home in a different way. His voice was steady, professional, but carrying an edge of something personal. Rahman is planning another major operation. We have 8 weeks to stop him. Shadow 9 is assembling now. They need a commander who knows the terrain, understands the enemy, and has personal motivation to see this through. Why me specifically? Because you survived what he designed to kill you, Commander. Because you know his tactics. Because you understand that valley better than our best satellite imagery. And because... Foster's voice softened slightly. Because my son was Aiden Foster, Captain, served parallel operations to Shadow 7. He speaks very highly of you. Aiden is your son? He is. And he's volunteered for Shadow 9, said he won't serve under anyone else, says you're the only commander he trusts for this mission. Ivy stood, walked to her window overlooking the base. In the distance, she could see the mountains, the same mountains where her team had died, where Rahman had orchestrated their deaths, where 7 soldiers had sacrificed themselves, believing their commander would survive to continue their work. Sir, she said quietly, what's the target profile? Rahman himself, high-value target, codename Reaper 6, currently operating from a fortified compound in the Coast Guardez Pass. The compound is built into the mountainside, same valley system where Red Wings 2 took place. He went back to the scene. It wasn't a question. He considers it sacred ground, the place where he defeated Shadow 7. He uses it as proof of his tactical genius. Foster paused. Prove him wrong, Commander. Take Shadow 9 into that valley. Show him that Shadow 7's knowledge didn't die. Show him that the team he killed trained someone who is coming back to finish the mission. Ivy looked at the memorial wall visible from her window, where 7 names were carved in stone. She thought about Aiden's words, that her team had died to preserve knowledge too valuable to lose. She thought about the 18 men she'd saved 3 weeks ago using tactics Shadow 7 had taught her. She thought about Khalid Rahman, thinking he was safe in the same valley where he'd murdered her team. General, she said, her voice carrying command authority that had been dormant for 3 years. Ghost 7 requesting permission to haunt. Shadow 9 is go. Outstanding. Your team assembles in 72 hours at Fort Bragg. Mission briefing is classified top secret. You'll receive full intel upon arrival. Foster's voice carried satisfaction. Welcome back to the fight, Commander. Bring them home. The line went dead. Ivy stood at her window, touching the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve. 7 ravens in flight, coordinates of where they had fallen, the date that changed everything. For 3 years, she'd run from this, from the responsibility, the guilt, the weight of being the one who survived. But maybe survival wasn't about hiding. Maybe it was about using what the dead had taught her to protect the living. She pulled up her computer, accessed personnel files, and began reviewing the dossiers for Shadow 9. 8 operators, 8 people who would trust her with their lives, who would follow her into the same terrain that had killed Shadow 7. This time would be different. This time she knew the enemy. This time she understood the terrain. This time, her phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. Heard about Shadow 9? I'm in. Whatever it takes, wherever it goes. Let's bring them home. She smiled slightly, the first genuine smile in 3 years. Shadow 7 had fallen, but they'd made sure their knowledge survived. Now, it was time to prove they hadn't died for nothing. Outside her window, the Afghan sun set over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in those mountains, Khalid Rahman thought he was Suf, thought Shadow 7 was just a memory. He was about to learn the difference between defeating a team and killing what they stood for. I'm coming, Ivy whispered toward the mountains. For my team, for every soldier you've hurt since, and for every person you'll never hurt again. The mission clock was running, Shadow 9 was coming, and Commander Ivy Marshall was finally ready to stop running from who she was. to embrace what her team had died teaching her, and to finish the mission that had cost her everything 3 years ago. The ghosts of Shadow 7 were about to find their peace, through the justice only their surviving commander could deliver, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. 72 hours later, the classified briefing room sat deep in the Special Operations Command headquarters, a windowless space designed to contain secrets. 8 operators sat around the conference table, each one handpicked for Shadow 9. Ivy recognized some faces. Aiden Foster, now promoted to warrant officer, sat directly across from her. The others were new, experienced special operators pulled from various units, each with specific skills Shadow 9 would need. General Raymond Foster stood at the head of the table, a man in his early 60s who carried himself with the particular confidence of someone who'd spent decades making life-and-death decisions. Behind him, a screen displayed a satellite image of mountainous terrain that made Ivy's chest tighten. She knew every ridge, every canyon, every approach route. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster began, "welcome to Shadow 9. This unit does not officially exist. Your families have been told you're on extended training. Your parent units believe you've been reassigned to staff positions. For the next 6 weeks, you are ghosts." He clicked to the next slide, a photograph of a man in his 50s, bearded, wearing traditional Afghan clothing. Hard eyes stared at the camera with the confidence of someone who had survived everything thrown at him. Khalid Rahman, codename Reaper 6, former Taliban commander, current leader of the Coast Network, a transnational terrorist organization responsible for over 40 attacks in the last 3 years. 217 confirmed kills, including civilians, coalition forces, and Afghan government personnel. Foster's voice was clinical, but anger lurked beneath. 3 years ago, Rahman acquired intelligence about coalition special operations in his region. He used that intelligence to set an ambush that resulted in the destruction of Shadow 7, a classified unit operating in the Coast Guardez Pass. The operator shifted, glancing at Ivy. She kept her face neutral, but her hands under the table were clenched tight. Shadow 7 was led by then-Captain Ivy Marshall, your new commander. She was the unit's sole survivor. Foster met Ivy's eyes. "Commander, would you brief the team on the operational environment?" Ivy stood, moved to the screen. Her voice came out steady despite the memories flooding back. The Coast Guardez Pass is a valley system approximately 15 kilometers long, surrounded by mountains reaching 3,000 meters elevation. It's been used by hostile forces for centuries because the terrain provides natural defensive positions and multiple escape routes. Coalition forces have attempted operations there repeatedly. Most have failed due to inadequate terrain knowledge. She clicked to a detailed topographic map. Shadow 7 operated in this region for 8 months in 2011. We mapped routes, cataloged enemy positions, identified patterns. We were effective, too effective. Rahman realized we were degrading his operational capability, so he planned an ambush specifically designed to eliminate us. One of the new operators, a woman in her early 30s with the build of a marathon runner, raised her hand. "Ma'am, how did he know your position? Someone leaked it. We never confirmed who, but the ambush was too perfect to be chance. They knew our extraction route, our timing, our team composition." Ivy's voice remained professional, but pain flickered across her face. "My team held the enemy off for 6 hours while I coordinated air support and looked for escape routes. They died buying time for me to survive, believing their tactical knowledge was too valuable to lose." The room was silent. Now, Rahman has returned to the same valley. "Intelligence indicates he's operating from a fortified compound here." She highlighted a location. "Built into the mountainside with natural cave systems providing additional protection. He believes he's safe because the only people who knew that terrain died 3 years ago." "But they didn't die," Aiden said quietly. "They made sure their knowledge survived." Ivy nodded. "Shadow 9's mission is to infiltrate that valley, neutralize Rahman, and extract without alerting his network to our presence. If we do this right, his organization will collapse from leadership vacuum. If we do this wrong, we'll trigger reprisals that could kill hundreds." Foster stepped forward. "This is a killer capture operation with extreme prejudice. You have 6 weeks to prepare. Commander Marshall will lead mission planning and execution. Questions?" A broad-shouldered operator with the call sign Hammer spoke up. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but how do we know the terrain intelligence from 3 years ago is still valid? Rahman could have changed everything." "He could have," Ivy agreed. But the mountains don't change, the rock formations don't change, the weather patterns don't change. What Rahman built, he built around terrain features I know intimately. That gives us the advantage. Another operator, young, maybe 26, with the intense focus of a sniper, asked, "What's the insertion method? Halo jump at night, land 15 kilometers from target, move on foot through terrain enemy considers impassable. They'll expect helicopter insertion or vehicle approach, both of which they can detect and counter. We go in the way they don't anticipate. That's a long foot movement through hostile territory," the sniper, call sign Reaper, observed. "Yes, which is why you were selected. Every person in this room has relevant experience. High-altitude operations, mountain warfare, small unit tactics, extended operations without resupply. This isn't a mission for conventional forces. This is why shadow units exist." Over the next 6 weeks, Ivy drove Shadow 9 harder than any of them had been trained before. They practiced mountain movement until they could navigate steep terrain in complete darkness. They rehearsed communications protocols until everyone could coordinate silently with hand signals alone. They studied satellite imagery until each operator could draw the valley system from memory. But Ivy also did something else, something that set Shadow units apart. She shared everything Shadow 7 had learned, every tactic, every technique, every lesson purchased with blood. Shadow 7 pioneered hybrid operations, she explained during a tactical session. "We did our own reconnaissance, our own strikes, our own extractions. No, depending on external assets that might not be available when you need them. You are a complete combat system, 8 people who can accomplish what conventional forces need a company to do." Aiden watched her teaching with quiet admiration. The woman who'd hidden in logistics for 3 years had fully embraced command again, and the difference was striking. This was who Ivy Marshall was meant to be, not pushing papers, but leading warriors into impossible situations and bringing them home alive. During a night training exercise in the North Carolina mountains, Ivy pulled Aiden aside. "Your father told me you volunteered specifically for this mission," she said. "Why?" "Because I served parallel operations to Shadow 7. I saw what your team accomplished. When they died, I watched how the enemy in our region changed. They got bolder, more aggressive, because they thought they'd eliminated the biggest threat." He met her eyes. "When I heard you were coming back, I knew this was the mission that mattered. Taking down the man who killed Shadow 7 isn't just tactics, it's justice. Justice doesn't bring them back. No, ma'am. But it prevents him from doing to another team what he did to yours. That's not justice. That's mission completion." Ivy was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Your father speaks highly of you." "He speaks highly of you, ma'am. Says Shadow 7 was the most effective unit he ever worked with. Says you're the best tactical mind he's encountered in 40 years of service. He's biased because his son is on my team. He's honest because he's seen what you can do." Aiden gestured toward the other operators training in the darkness. "These people trust you, Commander. Not because of your rank, but because you survived what killed your team, and you're using what you learned to make sure we don't make the same mistakes. That's leadership." 5 weeks into training, Foster called Ivy to his office. "Intelligence update," he said without preamble. "Rahman is planning something big. Communications intercepts suggest a major attack scheduled for 8 weeks from now. Target unknown, but casualties projected in the hundreds. If Shadow 9 doesn't neutralize him before then, we're looking at another mass casualty event. What's the timeline acceleration? Mission launches in 1 week. I know that's less preparation time than ideal, but we're out of options. Can your team be ready?" Ivy thought about Shadow 9, how they moved together now, with the coordination of a unit that had trained for months. How each operator understood not just their role, but everyone else's. How the knowledge Shadow 7 had paid for in blood was now living in 8 new soldiers. "They're ready, sir. Shadow 7 taught me you're never fully ready for these missions. You just get as prepared as possible, then trust your training and your team." "Good." Foster pulled out a folder marked Top Secret. "Final mission briefing is tomorrow. After that, you go dark. No external communications, no digital footprint. You'll insert via military transport to Boardroom. Then, civilian contractors will move you to the launch point. From there, you're on your own until mission complete." "Understood, sir." "Commander," Foster said as she turned to leave, "I'm trusting you with 8 lives, including my son's. I know what happened to Shadow 7. I know the weight you carry, but But I also know you're the only person who can lead this mission successfully. Bring them home. I will, sir. All of them. I promise. The final briefing was comprehensive. Intelligence analysts walked Shadow 9 through every detail: guard rotations, supply deliveries, communication patterns, neighboring village locations. They studied photographs of Rahman, learning to identify him by posture and movement patterns since he often wore disguises. But the most valuable intelligence came from Ivy herself. She walked the team through the valley using three-dimensional terrain models, explaining not just what the maps showed, but what they meant. "This ridge looks like good high ground," she said, pointing to a position. "But it's loose shale. Anyone moving across it creates noise that echoes through the valley. Shadow 7 learned that the hard way." She indicated another route. "This approach appears exposed, but morning fog fills this canyon every day at 0530, giving you 2 hours of concealment. The enemy knows about the fog, but they don't patrol during it because they can't see either. That's your window." It was knowledge that couldn't come from satellites or intelligence reports, only from having been there, having survived there, having paid attention to details that meant the difference between success and death. The night before deployment, Ivy found herself alone in the team room, staring at photographs of Shadow 7. She'd kept them hidden for 3 years, but now they were spread across the table. Memories of people who'd trusted her, followed her, died for her. "I'm going back," she told their images. "I'm going to finish what we started. I'm going to make sure Rahman never hurts anyone else the way he hurt us." She touched each face. "And I'm going to bring this new team home alive. I promise you that. Shadow 9 won't end like Shadow 7 did." Behind her, the door opened quietly. Sergeant First Class Emma Torres, the marathon runner-operator, stepped inside. "Ma'am, didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine, Sergeant. Can't sleep?" "Honestly, no, ma'am. Big mission nerves." Torres approached the table, looked at the photographs. "Shadow 7? Yes. They look happy. We were. We believed we were making a difference, that our work mattered. Then Rahman showed us how quickly that could end." Ivy gathered the photos. "But they also taught me something else, that the mission continues even when the people change. Shadow 7 fell, but what they learned didn't. Now it's my responsibility to pass that knowledge forward, to make sure Shadow 9 succeeds where we failed. Completed dozens of successful missions before the ambush. You degraded enemy capabilities, saved countless lives, pioneered tactics that are now doctrine. The fact that Rahman needed to plan a specific ambush to stop you proves how effective you were." Torres met her eyes. "One bad day doesn't erase months of success, and the fact that you survived means everything your team learned gets used to protect others. That's not failure, ma'am. That's mission continuation." Ivy was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Just truth, ma'am. Shadow 9 is ready because you made us ready. We're going to complete this mission, neutralize Rahman, and come home. All of us, because you won't accept any other outcome." After Torres left, Ivy placed the photographs in her gear, not hidden away but carried forward. Shadow 7 would be with her in that valley, their knowledge living through her hands, their sacrifice honored through her leadership. The insertion went perfectly. Shadow 9, Halo jumped from 25,000 feet in darkness so complete the ground was invisible until the last seconds before landing. They came down in a dispersed pattern across rough terrain, then moved silently to the rally point using GPS and night vision. From there, it was 15 kilometers of mountain movement, slow, methodical, professionally silent. They moved at night, hid during day, covered their tracks with techniques Ivy had learned from Shadow 7. Every operator knew their role, trusted the plan, believed in their commander. On the third night, they reached observation positions overlooking Rahman's compound. Through high-powered optics, they could see the facility, exactly where intelligence had indicated, built into the mountainside like a fortress. Guards patrolled with disciplined regularity, suggesting professional training rather than militia enthusiasm. "Hammer, give me guard count and rotation pattern," Ivy whispered into her radio. "Counting 12 exterior guards, rotating every 4 hours. Pattern suggests approximately 40 to 50 total security personnel. They're professional, good spacing, overlapping fields of fire, no obvious weak points in the perimeter. Reaper, can you reach the compound from here?" The sniper did calculations, checking wind and distance. "Negative, Commander. Range is too extreme for guaranteed hits. I'll need to move closer. That ridgeline at 2,000 meters would work." "That's exposed ground." "Yes, ma'am, but it's the only position with clear sight lines to key targets. Ivy studied the terrain through her scope, and memory overlaid current observation. She'd been on that exact ridgeline 3 years ago, had used it for Overwatch during Shadow 7 operations. She knew the approach route, the covered positions, the escape paths. "There's a route," she said quietly. "Follows that dry stream bed to the base of the ridge, then climbs the western face where shadows stay deepest. It's technical climbing, Class 4 rock, but it provides complete concealment from the compound." "How do you know that, ma'am?" Torres asked. "Because Shadow 7 used it. I've climbed that exact route." Ivy switched her radio to team frequency. "Mission adjustment. Reaper and I will move to the advanced position for precision targeting. Rest of team maintains observation here, ready to assault on my signal." "Ma'am," Aiden said carefully, "with respect, the commander shouldn't be in the most exposed position. The commander should be wherever she's most effective. I know that climb, I know that position, and Reaper needs a spotter who understands the target environment. We move in 2 hours when the moon sets." The climb was everything Ivy remembered, difficult, exposed in places, requiring absolute focus. But muscle memory guided her hands to whose hold she'd used 3 years ago, and Reaper followed her lead with the quiet competence of someone who trusted his commander's judgment. They reached the ridgeline position 90 minutes later, settling into a natural rock formation that provided both cover and clear sightlines to the compound 800 meters away. Through their optics, the compound revealed itself in detail: guards at entry points, technical vehicles parked in a motor pool, a main structure built into the cave system, secondary buildings for support functions. "There," Ivy whispered, indicating a figure emerging from the main building. Even at this distance, even through night vision, she recognized his posture, his gait, his bearing. "That's Rahman." Reaper settled his rifle, acquiring the target through his scope. "I have him. Clean shot. Authorization to engage." Everything in Ivy wanted to say yes, to end this now, to exact justice for Shadow 7, to eliminate the man who'd killed her team. Her finger hovered over her radio transmit button, but training overrode emotion. "Negative. We need confirmation of his identity and intelligence on his network before termination. One shot might kill Rahman, but it won't destroy his organization. We do this right, capture if possible, eliminate if necessary, but only after we extract actionable intelligence." "Understood, ma'am." They maintained observation for 6 hours, logging every movement, every vehicle, every pattern. As dawn approached, Ivy radioed the main team. "All elements, we have positive identification of Reaper 6. Compound security is professional but predictable. We're looking at a 48-hour observation window to identify optimal assault timing." But 48 hours became irrelevant 30 minutes later when Ivy's radio crackled with Aiden's voice, tense and urgent. "Commander, we have a situation. Large convoy approaching from the south. Estimate 20 vehicles, 200+ personnel. They're heading directly for the compound." Ivy swung her optics toward the southern approach. Headlights snaked through the valley, a massive force moving with military precision. "That's not a supply convoy," she said. "That's a military operation. Reaper, what do you see?" "Technical vehicles with heavy weapons, troop transports, command vehicles." "Ma'am, that looks like the attack force intelligence warned us about. They're staging here before launching their operation." If Rahman's entire attack force gathered at the compound, the opportunity was unprecedented. Eliminate not just the leader, but his operational capability. But it also meant Shadow 9 would be facing 10 times the enemy they'd planned for. Ivy's mind raced through options. Conventional doctrine said abort. The force imbalance was too great. But conventional doctrine also said 8 operators couldn't accomplish what Shadow 9 had already done. And if they pulled back now, Rahman would launch an attack that could kill hundreds. "All elements, stand by for new mission parameters," she said into her radio. Then to Reaper, "How many targets can you engage before they locate our position? If I move fast and they're confused, maybe 6 to 8 high-value targets before they figure out where I'm shooting from. And if we had additional teams creating diversions?" Reaper understood immediately. "Then I could stretch it to 10 or 12, maybe more. But Commander, even eliminating a dozen targets, we're still massively outnumbered. We don't need to eliminate everyone. We need to create chaos, remove leadership, and make them believe they're facing a much larger force." Ivy switched to command frequency. "All Shadow 9 elements, convergence on my position. Bring all assets. We're executing Operation Hammer, multiple simultaneous strikes designed to simulate battalion-strength assault while we extract high-value target. There was a pause, then Aiden's voice. "Ma'am, that's extremely aggressive for an 8-person team. Shadow 7 specialized in force multiplication tactics. Time to prove I learned the lessons they taught." She pulled up the tactical map on her display. "We have 4 hours before that convoy arrives and settles in. That's our window. Move now." Over the next 3 hours, Shadow 9 transformed from an observation unit into an assault force. They positioned shaped charges on key approach routes, set remote detonation devices to simulate artillery, established multiple sniper positions for crossfire, and wired the compound's fuel storage with enough explosives to create a fireball visible for kilometers. Ivy coordinated everything from the ridgeline position, using terrain knowledge that let her predict lines of sight, blast effects, and enemy response patterns. It was the kind of planning that required intimate familiarity with the environment, exactly what Shadow 7 had died providing her. "Remember," she told the team over radio, "our objective is extraction of Rahman alive if possible. Everything else is distraction and force multiplication. We make them think they're facing a major assault, extract our target during the confusion, and exfiltrate before they organize an effective response." "And if extraction isn't possible," Torres asked, "then we ensure Rahman doesn't survive to lead another attack. But capture is preferred. He has intelligence on his network that could save hundreds of lives." The convoy arrived exactly when predicted, 200 fighters filing into the compound with the organization of a professional military unit. Rahman emerged to greet their commanders, standing in the open courtyard where Reaper had a perfect shot. "Still no authorization?" Reaper asked quietly. "Not yet. Let them settle in, get comfortable. When they think they're safe, that's when we strike." Shadow 9 waited. Patience was a weapon, one Shadow 7 had taught Ivy to use. Let the enemy relax, let them assume security, let their guard drop just slightly. 2 hours after the convoy's arrival, Ivy gave the order. "All elements, execute Operation Hammer, go loud." The valley exploded into coordinated chaos. Shaped charges detonated on approach routes, simulating artillery strikes. Remote devices created explosions across multiple positions, suggesting widespread assault. Reaper began engaging high-value targets, commanders, communications personnel, heavy weapons operators, each shot carefully planned to maximize disruption. The effect was exactly what Ivy had predicted. The enemy force, believing they were under major assault from multiple directions, scattered into defensive positions. Leaders shouted contradictory orders. Fighters fired at shadows and movement that didn't exist. In the confusion, Ivy and Aiden moved toward the compound's main entrance. They wore enemy combat gear stripped from guards Reaper had eliminated, moved with the panicked urgency of fighters responding to attack. In the chaos, no one questioned 2 more armed figures running toward the command building. They reached Rahman's position just as he emerged, surrounded by bodyguards, heading for an armored vehicle. Ivy raised her weapon, not to shoot, but to get his attention in the chaos. "Khalid Rahman," she called in Pashto, her voice cutting through the noise. "Shadow 7 sends their regards." Rahman turned, saw her face, and in that instant recognized something. Perhaps the tactical precision of the assault. Perhaps the way she moved through terrain his forces controlled. Perhaps just the mention of Shadow 7, the unit he thought he'd destroyed. His eyes widened. "You..." Ivy shot his closest bodyguard. Non-lethal, high-thigh hit, and Aiden took down the second. Rahman reached for his weapon, but froze when Ivy's rifle centered on his chest. "3 years ago, you killed my team in this valley. You thought you had eliminated the threat, but they made sure I survived, made sure everything they learned would continue." She moved closer, weapon never wavering. "Now you're going to tell me everything about your network. Every cell, every operation, every target. And then you're going to answer for what you did to Shadow 7. Rahman's hand moved toward a radio. Reaper's shot took him in the shoulder, precise, disabling, exactly as planned. Rahman dropped, shock and pain overwhelming any resistance. "Package secured," Ivy radioed. "All elements, initiate exfiltration. Phase 2 is go." The fuel storage detonated right on schedule, a massive fireball that drew every fighter's attention. In that moment of distraction, Shadow 9 converged on the extraction port, a narrow canyon route that Ivy had identified during mission planning, too small for vehicles but perfect for foot movement. They moved fast, carrying the wounded Rahman between them, using terrain and timing that only intimate knowledge of the valley could provide. Behind them, the enemy force remained scattered, convinced they'd faced a major assault, rather than 8 operators using tactics Shadow 7 had pioneered. 12 hours later, Shadow 9 crossed into secure territory. They'd moved through terrain enemy forces considered impassable, evaded pursuit through routes that didn't appear on any map, and extracted a high-value target with 0 friendly casualties. The debriefing at Boardroom lasted 3 days. Rahman, facing federal terrorism charges and certain life imprisonment, provided detailed intelligence on his entire network. Within a week, coordinated raids across 3 countries dismantled the Coast network, preventing the planned attack and eliminating a terrorist organization that had killed hundreds. General Foster personally flew to Boardroom to meet Shadow 9. He found Ivy alone in a briefing room, studying satellite imagery of the valley where her team had died. "Commander," he said quietly, "you did it. Mission complete, all objectives achieved, 0 friendly casualties. Shadow 7 would be proud. Shadow 7 made this possible, sir. Everything we did, they taught me. Every tactic, every technique, every decision point. I was following their training. They didn't die for nothing. They died building knowledge that's just saved hundreds of lives." Foster nodded. "Pentagon wants to establish shadow units as a permanent program, multiple teams operating globally, using the tactics you've proven effective. They want you to lead the program, training, doctrine development, operational oversight." Ivy was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sir, I'd be honored, but on one condition." "Name it." "Shadow 7 gets official recognition. Their names, their service, their sacrifice. They were classified for operational security, but that operation is over. Let their families know what they accomplished. Let the military community understand what they pioneered. They earned that." "Done." Foster extended his hand. "Welcome to command, General Marshal. Yes, that's your new rank. Pentagon approved it this morning. Effective immediately, you're heading Special Operations Training Command, responsible for developing the next generation of shadow units." They shook hands, but Ivy's eyes remained on the valley image. "I'm going back there someday, sir, to the place where Shadow 7 fell. I want to establish a memorial on that ridgeline, something permanent, so everyone who operates in that valley knows what happened there, knows the price 7 soldiers paid to protect others. I'll make it happen." 6 months later, Ivy stood on a ridgeline in the Coast Guardez Pass, surrounded by Shadow 9 and 50 other Special Operations personnel. A bronze memorial had been erected, 7 names carved in stone, facing toward the mountains where they had fought their last battle. Fletcher was there, having flown from Afghanistan specifically for the ceremony. Bradley, Bellatrix, Connor, all the officers who had dismissed her at FOB Sentinel stood at attention, rendering honors to a team they'd never known existed. But the most important attendees were 7 families, parents, siblings, spouses of Shadow 7 members, who'd been told their loved ones died in training accidents. Now they learned the truth. Their family members had been elite operators who'd pioneered tactics, saved countless lives, and made the ultimate sacrifice protecting others. Ivy stood before them, wearing her general's stars, carrying the weight of command, but also the peace that came from honoring those who'd made it possible. "Shadow 7 was declared KIA 3 years ago in this valley," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "They died fighting overwhelming odds, buying time for their commander to survive and carry forward their knowledge. For 3 years, I ran from that responsibility. I hid in logistics, pretended I could escape the weight of command, convinced myself that staying away from combat would somehow honor their sacrifice." She paused, looking at each family member. "I was wrong. The way to honor Shadow 7 wasn't to hide from what they taught me. It was to use that knowledge to protect others, to pass forward their tactics, to ensure their sacrifice created a legacy that would save lives for generations." Ivy gestured toward Shadow 9. "These operators, and dozens more now training in shadow units worldwide, are alive today because 7 soldiers in 2011 spent 8 months learning this valley, developing tactics, pioneering techniques that are now saving lives globally. Shadow 7 didn't fail. They succeeded so completely that their methods became doctrine. Their innovations became standard practice. Their sacrifice became the foundation for protecting countless others." She turned to the memorial, rendered a crisp salute. "Shadow 7, mission complete. Your knowledge lives on. Your sacrifice was not in vain, and your names will be remembered as long as warriors fight to protect others. Every person present saluted, special operators, conventional forces, officers, enlisted, foreign liaison personnel. They stood in silence, honoring 7 soldiers whose classified service had finally received the recognition it deserved. After the ceremony, the families approached Ivy one by one. Each conversation was different. Some wanted details about their loved one's service, others just needed to hear that the death had meaning, all of them grateful to finally understand what had really happened. CPL James Mitchell's mother gripped Ivy's hands tight. "Thank you for surviving, General. Thank you for making sure my son's sacrifice mattered. Thank you for being the person he believed you were." SSG David Rodriguez's wife brought their daughter, now 11 years old, born months after her father died. "Tell her about her daddy. Your father was the best teammate I ever served with. He was brave, skilled, and completely dedicated to protecting others. Everything I've accomplished since his death, I accomplished because he and his team taught me how. Your daddy was a hero, not because he died, but because of how he lived and what he fought for." As sunset painted the valley in gold and red, Ivy found herself alone at the memorial. Shadow 9 had given her space, understanding that some moments required solitude. She touched each name carved in bronze, remembering faces and voices and shared dangers. "I finished it," she told them. "Rahman's network is destroyed. Shadow units are operational worldwide. Your tactics are doctrine, your innovations are standard practice, and your sacrifice is recognized. I kept my promise. I used what you taught me. I protected others with your knowledge, and I made sure you'd never be forgotten." The wind carried her words across the valley, toward peaks still wrapped in twilight. In the fading light, for just a moment, Ivy could almost see them. 7 soldiers in full combat gear, arms around each other, proud smiles on their faces. Not ghosts demanding vengeance, but warriors satisfied their mission was complete. "Rest easy, Shadow 7, Ivy whispered. "I've got it from here. Your watch is ended. Mine continues." She saluted one final time, then turned and walked down the mountain where Shadow 9 waited, where new missions beckoned. Where the work of protecting others, the work Shadow 7 had died teaching her, would continue for as long as she drew breath. Behind her, the memorial stood against darkening sky, a permanent testament to 7 soldiers who'd pioneered tactics that would save thousands, whose sacrifice had built a legacy that would endure for generations, whose names would be spoken with reverence by every operator who followed their path. Shadow 7 had fallen. But what they stood for, courage, innovation, sacrifice for others, would never die. It would live forever in the warriors they'd trained, the tactics they'd developed, and the commander they'd ensured would survive to carry their knowledge forward. Mission complete, all debts paid, all promises kept. General Ivy Marshall walked toward her team, toward her future, toward missions yet to come. She carried Shadow 7's legacy forward, not as a burden, but as an honor, not as guilt, but as purpose. They'd given her the tools to save lives. She'd spend the rest of her career proving they'd chosen the right person to survive. Service doesn't wear a single uniform. Courage isn't always loud, and the measure of a soldier isn't where they serve. It's how they serve when it matters most. Shadow 7 had taught her that lesson in the hardest way possible. Now she'd spend her life teaching it to others, so that their sacrifice would echo through generations, so that their names would never fade, so that warriors yet unborn would benefit from knowledge purchased with blood in a valley halfway around the world. This was her mission now. This was her purpose. This was how Shadow 7 would live forever.